Good morning, and we will start today's lecture. I have started recording. Um, I ended the last class with a discussion about oxidative addition, mechanisms of oxidative addition, and we found that there were two major pathways by which oxidative addition could happen. We were primarily talking about two electron oxidative additions, and these two electron oxidative additions seemed to happen in a stepwise fashion, which involved radicals. There was also a SN2 type pathway, and let's use the slides. This is there was an SN2 pathway, and the SN2 pathway was studied using Vaska's complex and methyl halides. And these reactions showed us that you could have very clear SN2 kinetics, so or kinetics, whichever you prefer, was an SN2 pathway, and it was also there was also some evidence based on the substituent effects on the metal that suggested very clearly that electron-rich metal centers undergo oxidative additions fairly easily. So all of these things put together, the leaving group ability of the X group, leaving group ability of X, the steric effects of the R group, and the electron density requirements of the metal, all of them indicated that this was an SN2 pathway. But then came the requirement for umbrella inversion, and surprisingly, they figured out that there was the presence of radicals. There was very clear indication that radicals were involved when you had even a single substituent on the substrate undergoing oxidative addition, substrate undergoing nucleophilic substitution, I should say, because metal is undergoing oxidative addition, the carbon is undergoing a simple substitution reaction. So this chirality problem was solved when they realized that there was a radical chain mechanism that was involved. And I told you that iridium two species were intermediates, iridium 2 species were intermediates, and there was sufficient evidence to show that in fact the radicals R dot is a one which is the propagating species and so on. So although the net reaction is still oxidative addition of Rx across the iridium 1 species, it is very clear that you have a radical involvement. The radical clock, this is called the radical clock, that is cyclopropyl carbonyl. Let me see if I can highlight that for you. This is the radical clock. The clock ticks at 10 power 8 second minus 1. So if a radical cyclopropyl carbonyl radical is formed, it quickly ring opens at this particular rate. So intermediacy of a radical doesn't have to be spectroscopically determined by ESR. You know that it is there because a ring open product has been formed. A simple SN2 pathway, like the one that is written here, this type of an SN2 pathway will not involve or it will not result in the formation of ring open species. So presence of ring open species suggests that the radical was involved, and we found through a couple of different examples that radicals are being formed because ring open products were obtained, and this turned out to be dependent on the X group. Okay. Now, of course, we cannot change the R group because R group is cyclopropyl carbonyl species, the cyclopropyl methyl species. So you cannot have that being changed. That's the one which stabilizes the radical and allows for ring opening. The same type of a ring opening has been observed in the case of tin species also. Here I have pictured for you a tin oxidative addition. This is tin 2, okay, becoming tin 4. So it's an oxidative addition and it has undergone ring opening. It has undergone a ring opening reaction. Okay. So oxidative additions seem to be going through two different mechanisms, an SN2 pathway and a radical chain pathway. So these are the two mechanisms of oxidative addition. Now, I told you that this is primarily the case with species which are adding on to alkenes. So group 1 consisted of all the addenda that can add on to alkenes. Now we can do the same thing. I mean, there are two other groups. We can ask the same questions about group 2 and group 3. Unfortunately, group 2 and group 3 have much less mechanistic studies for some obvious reasons and some reasons which are just practical reasons. One of them is the fact that the second group, which I labeled as those molecules which have multiple bonds between the addenda. So two oxygen atoms are adding. So there is a double bond between the two oxygen atoms. Then what happens is one bond is retained. So there is no question of anything other than a cis addition. What I have shown for you on the screen is a cis addition. And that cis addition is the only thing that can happen. Not only that, it is just addition of A plus B. It's a bimolecular reaction and end of story. There is nothing more to discuss in that. The third group, on the other hand, involves addition of two non-polar species. Now there is only one bond between the two groups which are being added, but then the group is very non-polar, and these mechanisms turn out to be very complicated. As I told you, agostic interactions can happen before the oxidative addition, and that is supposed to be an intermediate step in the oxidative addition. But more than that, mechanistic details are not really available. People have, especially computational chemists, have tried to distinguish between various types of bond stretches and geometries for this oxidative addition, and they have come up with almost 21 different types of transition states. But I don't believe that you need, I mean, they're all nitpicking. I don't believe that that much is necessary, but nevertheless, theoretically, people have distinguished many different types of transition states. Let me now come to the reverse reaction. I'm going to the reverse reaction, which is reductive elimination. Ideally, reductive elimination should be considered as a simple reverse of the oxidative addition. So oxidative addition, if you just reverse the reaction, then it should be reductive elimination. There should be very little. Once you study oxidative addition, reductive elimination should be obvious. But look at the thermodynamics of the whole process. Two groups, methyl group and X group. In the case of the well-studied Vasquez complex, methyl group and X group are added across the iridium. You have now got an iridium 3 CH3X species. The reverse reaction would depend on the stability of the product. So, for example, I have just given for you a sketch of a free energy profile. That was not, that's a product. Okay. So, depending on how well the product is stabilized with respect to the reactant, how well this is stabilized, that is going to determine the energy of activation for the reverse process. Energy of activation for the reverse process is going to be like this, especially if it is going to be exactly the same process repeated. That is, if the same process is going in the reverse direction, you expect the energy of activation to be very high. So the more the stability of the product, the more the energy of activation. So the red line indicates a more stable product. Then there's going to be very little tendency for reductive elimination to take place. So very often, the reductive elimination of the same two groups which added on. For example, instead of methyl halide, if I added X2, then the oxidized product is going to be extremely stable. Then you're not going to be able to do a reductive elimination. So reductive elimination is often not going to be the same two groups which are coming out. I will illustrate this now. Before I do that, I will just tell you one more thing. Imagine why this is so difficult, reductive elimination of the same species. We looked at oxidative addition of methyl halide across Vasquez complex. Now, if the same thing has to go in the reverse direction, first the X minus has to come out. First, the X minus has to come out. This is the X minus coming out from, so this has to leave. And this, of course, would be more easy in the case of a polar solvent. So we can provide a polar solvent, that's not the problem. Then the X minus has to make a nucleophilic attack on CH3, and that CH3X should be formed. That's how the microscopic reversibility requires oxidative addition to happen. Sorry, reductive elimination to happen for an oxidatively added product. So, in these cases, in the case of group 2 and group 3, you just have to break which have been formed and a new bond to be formed between the old bonds. So that's what you would expect. So no easy solution is there for reductive elimination, but nevertheless reductive elimination happens. I will come to it in a few minutes. But let me just tell you that oxidative addition of CH groups is a hot topic. CH activation is a hot topic, especially for methane. We have come a long way in the last 20 years. I will give you some examples towards the end of the class for methane activation, what has been done. But as early as 1983, methane activation was known, but these were esoteric reactions. A, it was carried out under photochemical conditions. B, it was done in perfluorinated solvent. Because even your solvent becomes reactive, then you're not going to get a simple mixture of a simple product. You will get a mixture of products. So here, perfluorinated cyclohexane allowed the oxidative addition of methane to iridium-1, but the iridium-1 was a species which was terribly coordinatively unsaturated. It was just iridium-1 CO. So this was very reactive, and so it reacted with CH4. And that gave you this product. Now imagine the reverse reaction. That is just methane elimination from this. You have two very strong bonds to break, and the formation of a carbon hydrogen bond. Excuse me for a minute. Hello. Yeah, I have a class and colleagues. So I lost track. So now let me come to reductive elimination. Okay. So so this process of reductive elimination from this methane oxidatively added product is difficult. This is difficult. Usually it's not so easily observed. So let's take a look at some of the other better characterized reductive elimination species. This is going to be a difficult subject to deal with. So please take close attention. These reactions are not easy to study, and so it's not going to be easy to study in the laboratory, and so it's not going to be easy to study with books either. But I've chosen a few examples which are very interesting, but they are all quite a few of them are recent. So these have been just been studied recently. It was not possible to do this earlier, and you'll realize why. So the first example that I've chosen is the reductive elimination from cobalt-3 species. And the cobalt-3 species is listed here. It's an octahedral complex that undergoes reductive elimination with the formation of a carbon-carbon bond. This is interesting also because most of the carbon-carbon bond forming catalysts are palladium, rhodium, and ruthenium, and all of them are expensive. So there is a great deal of interest in making a base metal catalyst. In other words, easily available catalysts. Those are the third row elements. Cobalt is the third row element. So if you can do catalysis using the 3D transition metals, you will find yourself a rich person. So this work was done by this person, Berns Schutter, or Berns Schutter. It's a German name, difficult to pronounce, and so is this the Chinese name, Zhu. So these two people published a paper which involved this reaction. First of all, to make this is the octahedral complex that I told you as the title, or as the title of this paper, but this was made by Karash. Those of you who have studied organic chemistry well will know that Karash was a person who did radical chemistry, a lot of radical chemistry, and that was in 1940s. Okay, so this compound was known since 1940. In 2011, Berns Schutter publishes this paper. Berns Schutter publishes this paper where he studied the reductive elimination of methane from this complex. To make this complex, one needs to take this species, which is a cobalt-1 species, and add methyl iodide. Notice that there are two equivalents of methyl iodide that are added, and one of the methyl iodides, in fact, goes to making PMe4 plus I minus. Okay, that's why you need two equivalents. And one equivalent of PME3 is in fact used up in the formation of PME4i. That's a small matter, but this is an oxidative addition reaction, pretty much like the way you would, we have just studied. What was interesting about Bernskutter's work was that he and his student figured out, Zhu, figured out that if they heat this octahedral complex at 50 degrees in benzene or heptane, you can eliminate ethane. Now, what you added oxidatively was methyl iodide. What you have eliminated is methane. So it is not the reverse of the oxidatively added product. So now we are going to look at reductive elimination of two species from a compound which is not giving you the starting material which we had described in the previous slide. Now, this compound is paramagnetic. This compound is paramagnetic. This compound is diamagnetic. This is a D6 system. Okay, so it's a nice diamagnetic system and which can be studied by NMR. The reason why this system became very important was because they were able to study it by NMR. They were able to study it by UV visible spectroscopy. Both of these compounds had very different UV visible spectra. And because this is paramagnetic, they could follow the disappearance of the starting material by NMR. You can think of various ways by which this reaction can happen. One of them, one important question that you have to answer is that is the reductive elimination happening from this complex directly, or is it undergoing dissociation of one of the ligands to form a 5-coordinate intermediate, which then eliminates methane? So this might seem to be a strange question. I want to ask you how many of you would think that this reaction requires elimination of PME3 before ethane extrusion. I want we can just have a show of hands. We don't have to do a poll. In fact, I have a poll, but I'm not going to give you the poll. I'm just going to ask you, can I see a show of hands? How many of you think that this type of a loss of PME3 is important before we observe ethane elimination? This will also tell me how many of you are paying attention, because I don't get to see whether you are listening or not listening. How many of you think that it is not necessary that this goes directly here and ethane is eliminated? Okay, so let me see. All of you, 10 of you have lifted your hand saying that there is a direct formation of 11 of you have thought 11 students. Now the only problem is I don't know whether the others are switched off or whether they don't want to say anything about the reaction. But I would have also voted with you and said that this will go directly from here to here. Why? Because the formation of a methyl-methyl bond is involved. And if I want to form a methyl-methyl bond, I would like to have a system which is having the two methyl groups close to each other. If I have an octahedral species, the methyl groups will be close. If I have a pentagonal bipyramidal or a square pyramidal intermediate like this, then the groups are likely to be further away. So I would say that this goes directly here. Okay, But what they found was if they did this reaction in CD3CN or CH3CN for that matter, the reaction stopped completely, which made them suspicious that there was a dissociation event involved prior to the elimination of ethane. If you do it in CH3CN, no ethane. So that is why they suspected that maybe PME3 dissociation was involved. The reason why now, since it's difficult for me to keep asking questions, but let me ask you another question. How can they be sure that PME3 dissociation is involved and not I- dissociation? There are two species. Obviously, with methyl group dissociating, then the reaction becomes very different, right? So, is it PME3 or is it I-? I have written the equation as if it is PME3. But how can they distinguish between the two? Or can you distinguish?
So with a silver ion present, precipitation of silver iodide.
Okay. If I have dissociation of I-, I can facilitate the process by addition of Ag+. Then Agi will come down and then the reaction will be much faster. Very good. Any other way? That's a very
Sir,
yeah.
PME3 is a gaseous species, so there will be effervescence if PME3 were to be dissociated.
Okay. Okay, I don't know the boiling point of PME3. I didn't check it up, but I think it is probably a highly volatile species, like you're thinking. But it was possible to add some PME3, okay, in solution. So let's proceed. What they what they did was they added two equivalents or 5 equivalents of PME3, excess PME3, and they showed that the reaction completely stopped. If you do it in acetonitrile, reaction stopped. Okay, so if you added NBU4I, no change in reaction rate. So what this tells us is, if you have I- in excess, no change in reaction rate. So I- is not coming out, PME3 is coming out. So that is interesting because the reaction rate is clearly affected by addition of PME3. It's not affected by NBU4I-. So silver ion is a good test. If you add silver ion, there should be no change in the reaction because I- is not coming out. Okay, so these are some initial experiments. Now, after the formation of the 5-coordinate intermediate, this is the 5-coordinate intermediate. This 5-coordinate intermediate can go through a radical pathway. The radical, you remember the radical chain reaction? Exactly similar situation. If I have a radical elimination, I have free radical, and this free radical can react with the cobalt methyl group and form ethane. That is one way in which the reaction can proceed. Another way is to do a concerted elimination. Now let me ask you the question, how many of you would think that the concerted elimination would be simpler than having a radical dissociation and a radical intermediate being formed? Any takers for concerted elimination? So I am betting on concerted elimination, okay? So this is my vote. This is my vote. Now I want you to tell me whether whether it is possible. You think the radical, because there is precedence for the radical, but to me it looks like the concerted elimination would be a simpler mechanism. Anybody else wanting to opt for the concerted elimination? You don't have to choose that just because I have chosen it. I'm telling you as if I have not read the paper. Okay. This is frankly my, as I read the paper, as I studied this reaction, my first feeling was no dissociation is necessary. I was proved wrong. Okay. Dissociation was necessary. This is still a mystery. And I will tell you that this is a very common theme in all reductive eliminations. Almost every reductive elimination is preceded by a dissociation step. Okay, it's very counterintuitive, not what you expect, but this is a fact. Reductive eliminations are preceded by dissociations. Okay, second, I shouldn't say second surprise, but this is the second one. Second question that I'm asking is between a concerted elimination and a radical cage pathway or a radical free radical formation, radical chain pathway, or it could be a cage. If it is a cage, it's very difficult to find out. But how many of you would vote for a concerted elimination? Quick. Nobody wants to choose that? Okay. We have only 2 people because I think I have kind of biased you by saying that I am voting for this concerted elimination. I told you that there are several surprises. Okay, it is not a simple reaction. It is a tough reaction to study. I will tell you. Good. So let's proceed. The researchers found some very strange, they could not figure out the presence of the radical. What they did was they wrote down one more pathway, and that is they wrote one more pathway in which you have alpha hydrogen abstraction. So why do you need to have a 5-coordinate intermediate? Maybe there is a step which involves a rearrangement of the methyl group to a methylene and a hydride. Okay, so this is just imagine this CH2H. So you have now a vacant site here. This vacant site, you have this CH abstraction, and that gives you this carbene hydride intermediate. So this carbene hydride intermediate now has got an anionic group and it has got a neutral group, and it can undergo migratory insertion. I hope you're all paying attention. This will undergo migratory insertion where the methyl group migrates to the methylene group. So exactly the same thing that we have studied in carbonyl migration. Now you have methyl migrating to a carbene, and then you have now an ethyl moiety on the cobalt. This ethyl moiety plus the hydrogen can attach itself together and form ethane. In fact, I could have made it I could have made it color coded, but I think you can follow this particular reaction fairly easily. Combination of the formation of this bond. So methyl-methyl bond could be formed. You could also have this type of a carbon hydrogen bond formation, because carbon hydrogen bond formation is probably in their mind. I'm just trying to work. Maybe they thought that such eliminations have been observed before. And so maybe that is the reason why you have to generate this vacant site and subsequent formation of, this is the starting material STM to a vacant coordination site, 5 coordinate intermediate, and the 5 coordinate intermediate becomes this species and then subsequently does an elimination. This is a very convoluted pathway, but nevertheless, they figured out if this is happening, then this might require a vacant coordination site. Because you have a CH bond breaking, you can distinguish this using isotope effects. You can use isotope effects to figure out whether such kind of bond breaking is happening or not. So if you do the reaction with CD3 and if you do the reaction with CH3, then a CD bond breaking and formation of COD, okay, would require a very large isotope effect. The difference between CH and CD is fairly large. Breaking the CH versus CD is fairly large. In organic chemistry, if you have learned enough physical organic chemistry, you would know that the difference in the rates can be as high as 7 times. CH is easier to break by 7 times. Why? Because of the 0 point energy of CH and CD. The 0 point energy of CH and CD is different. CD is lower, so it requires a greater activation energy, and as a result, it is usually a slower reaction. So they did the isotope effect studies and they found that both rates are approximately 1:1.2. Yes, deuterium makes a difference, and the deuterium rate is about 1.2 times lower than the hydrogen elimination, the ethane elimination when there is only hydrogen in it. So what we have shown is that among the various pathways, there are 3 pathways that we have discussed. One is the radical pathway. Detection of the methyl radical can be checked. How can you detect methyl radical? You can detect methyl radical. How will you detect it?
With a radical trap.
Radical trap. Somebody else said something else?
Sir, by applying tempo.
Okay, that's a radical trap. Yes. So one can also provide something like CHD. Okay, CHD. One second. CHD is cyclohexadiene. And this is a radical, it's a hydrogen H dot donor. So if methyl radical is formed, this results in methane elimination. And then the formation of the very stable cyclohexyl dienyl radical. So because of this, you can use this, but if it's a very tight radical cage, you might miss it. Okay, if it's a tight radical cage, you might miss it. Otherwise, you can. So radicals were ruled out. No radicals detected or trapped. Okay, so the concerted elimination is one pathway. The hydrogen versus deuterium reaction was done. So that seems to eliminate this pathway, because here couple of places CH bond has to be broken, COD bond also has to be broken. So both ways people have one of them would have an effect. So the small isotope effect is precluding this pathway where you have a alpha hydrogen elimination. Although this is a very nice way to explain why you need a 5-coordinate intermediate. I should say that this is a beautiful experiment, but it rules out the formation of the 5-coordinate intermediate going to a carbene methyl. So, one or two things that they found very interesting in this paper is that the methyl PME3, when it comes out, the two methyl groups exchange. So one is an axial methyl group, another is an equatorial methyl group. So you can see that very nicely here. You have axial and you have a green equatorial methyl group. And these two seem to be interchanging fairly rapidly. That can be explained very readily using a Berry pseudo-rotation. The Berry pseudo-rotation is also known as a turnstile pathway. And we don't have too many turnstiles in our country, but turnstiles are there is one behind the guest house. If you want to see what a turnstile is, it is basically a pivot on which a door rotates. Okay, so you have you might have it in malls, but you have a rotation, and this rotation can be two methyl groups and a trimethylphosphine rotating, and then you will end up with the other compound. So the methyl groups seem to interchange much faster than the elimination of the ethane. So these have been studied using a technique called EXSY, exchange spectroscopy. This is just exchange spectroscopy. They showed that PME3 exchanges faster than ethane elimination, and ME position exchanges faster than ethane elimination. Ethane elimination was occurring at 10 power minus 5 second minus 1. I think it's around 3.5 into 10 power minus 5 second minus 1, whereas the exchanges were happening at almost 10 orders of magnitude faster. Okay, so this was around 1 per second. Okay, is that correct? Yes, that's correct. So this exchange was very fast. Let me write it in the same notation, 1 second minus 1. Okay, so exchange of the methyl groups was happening per second, whereas this was happening only 3.5 into 10 power minus 5 seconds. Okay, so these experiments very clearly showed that the 5-coordinate intermediate was freely formed. It was interchanging at different positions, and then a slow elimination was being formed. Excuse me. Hello. Class is there. Class. So, sorry, today I have too many phone calls. Okay. So, before I conclude, let me tell you that whatever I have told you so far seems to suggest that a concerted elimination is the most probable pathway, but the reaction is not as simple as that. There is one more complication, and that is they did one experiment where they took CO, CH3, CD3, I with PR3 twice. Okay, so the starting material had CH3 and CD3, and then they did the elimination. If it was completely intramolecular, you expect only CH3, CD3. But if you do it with, if it was going through some intermolecular pathway, you would get CH3, CD3, CH3, CH3, and CD3, CD3. And surprisingly, they found that the 5-coordinate intermediate could interchange. The 5-coordinate intermediate could interchange, and as a result, it had multiple exchanges, and the ratio was let me just move. Yeah, the ratio was found to be 1:9. In other words, this is the only product that is expected. This is the only product that is expected, but they found 1/10 of the products to be CH3, CH3, and that is a surprise. Okay, and they found 1/10 to be CH3, CH3, this species which I have highlighted here. And as time progressed, it became more and more. As time progressed, it became more and more. This is you see that this is getting much larger compared to the expected product. So that seemed to suggest that you can have exchange of methyl groups between two different 5-coordinate intermediates. Since the 5-coordinate intermediate can bridge through the iodine, you can have exchanges of the methyl and the CD3 groups between two different cobalt species. So that was also studied by them. In other words, the net result is a very complicated result. It clearly suggests that you can have a complicated reductive elimination pathway. Okay, let me remove this from the screen and tell you that this was not unexpected, because in the 1970s, it was shown that the two things that I here was already studied in late 70s and 80s. They showed that low coordinated complexes are better at reductive elimination. This was done by Norton and so these are people who have written the book, Coleman and Hegedus. Coleman, Hegedus, and Norton and Finke. I think those are the people who have written the book on mechanisms of organometallic reactions, and they had studied that, and they had shown that low coordinated species are better for reductive elimination, and dinuclear complexes seem to be involved, contrary to what is expected from microscopic reversibility. And they studied it with osmium. They studied with osmium, and they did double labeling experiments in order to show that, in fact, it is possible to have such type of dinuclear species from which elimination was happening. So let me now, what is this double labeling experiment? similar to what I told you just now, you take equal amounts of methyl hydride species and CD3D species. Here you expect only CD4. The products that you expect are only CD4 and CH4 if there is no mixing possible. But if there are dinuclear intermediates involved like this, you can imagine formation of CD3H, CH3D, and CD4 and CH4. So this type of experiment was done, and they got a mixture of products, which clearly showed that dinuclear species are probably involved. Finally, I should tell you that this is work, I think, by Coleman. This was work done by Coleman. He did a very complicated experiment again, and the complicated experiment was to check if you can stop the dinuclear elimination using isolation of the species, so that if it doesn't meet with another rhodium or another osmium, it's not going to do elimination. So if dinuclear species are required, then I can prevent it by fixing it on a polymer substrate. So this is a polymer, this is actually silica gel. He did the experiment with silica gel, and he loaded the complexes on a silica gel framework. Ordinary silica gel is good enough. You can functionalize it with phosphines, and the catalyst and the complex was loaded onto the surface of the silica gel. And depending on the loading level, suppose you have isolated species, then these two cannot come together to react. Whereas if I have a large number of phosphines, then I can have the possibility of, I have the probability of two species being close by, and they can do dinuclear elimination. So using this type of a trick, he did this reaction where varied the loading level and the elimination. He could measure the number of non-isolated species using UV visible spectroscopy. So suffice it to say that he could distinguish between these two type of sites. He can spectroscopically figure out whether the column of the silica gel substrate was very heavily loaded and capable of dinuclear interaction, or whether it had only mononuclear species. So then he varied the rate of reductive elimination. He studied the rate of reductive elimination as a function of loading level. If you have very high loading level, the rate increased. That suggested that if you have very high loading level, most of the sites are rhodium next to rhodium. Okay, so the probability of rhodium being next to rhodium is very high if you have high loading level, and then rate goes up. So using this type of technique, it was possible, both double labeling and loading level experiments, it was possible to show that reductive elimination is a lot more complex than oxidative addition. It requires a vacant coordination site. That was shown both in the case of osmium and in the case of rhodium and in the case of cobalt that we studied today. In addition, it was shown that dinuclear species seem to be involved for reductive elimination, and not just it is from mononuclear species. Okay. So I'm going to stop here today because this is a very difficult section that we have talked about. You can ask questions. I had to go through a little fast because otherwise we won't have time for questions, but we can discuss now. Any questions? So what we have shown, we have studied is that mechanism is fairly complex. Dissociation is essential. That is something that we have very clearly studied. And the other thing that we have studied is that you should, each case has to be examined fairly carefully because so many different pathways are possible. Any
Excuse me, sir.
Anantu, yes.
Sir, have they did any experiments with the cobalt complex you have shown before without iodine, like a complex which cannot bridge?
No, the difficulty in the cobalt case, what they point out is that there are many other cobalt complexes with two alkyl groups, but then the decomposition of the elimination of the two alkyl groups from the cobalt gives you a complex mixture, and many of them are not what one might call as a well-behaved system. Okay, so if it is not well-behaved, you can't do kinetics and other such experiments. Even here, there is something that they have glossed over, and that is they agree that they are not able to figure out at what stage in this reaction you have a spin state change, because this is paramagnetic and this is diamagnetic. And if you have a radical coming out, then of course there is a spin state change that is possible, very readily possible. And the formation of the paramagnetic species would not be a surprise. Otherwise, if you have a spin change, that will slow down the reaction, basically. Quantum mechanically, it would be difficult to have a spin change when you have a concerted reaction. That is, those are complications. My answer to your question is, it's not possible to change this I very easily. If you do that, reaction becomes more complex.
Sir, is that the case even if you use another type? No, sir. Instead of trimethylphosphine, if you use trimethylphosphine instead of you use triphenylphosphine or some other ligands.
Yeah.
Even in that case, the reaction will proceed through complicated mechanisms, or is there any simple correlation with that?
They have not done that. This itself is probably quite a time-consuming study. They have done. I have condensed it to 1 hour discussion, but they have done a whole bunch of experiments with exchange correlation, exchange spectroscopy, and kinetics. A lot of kinetics they have done, and that has helped them to understand the reaction fairly carefully. So I don't know if their lab has published other examples. I have not checked that.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this recording then, and we will continue on Friday. Tomorrow I'm going to have, for another group, I'm going to discuss reaction mechanisms. I will find out if any of you are interested in listening. It's going to be a discussion time, so I'll find out if you can also join. Then you can also join if you're free. Thank you.